The rumor mill is running rampant around the NHL right now. Today, we address three rumors that the Maple Leafs have been linked to. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What's going on, Dave? How you feeling on this beautiful Thursday?
Feeling a lot better than Rangers fans after that game one debacle against the Panthers.
Yeah. I mean, been there. I know what it's like when Bobrovsky is unbeatable. You know, we are well aware of what Officer Bob gets up to come playoff time. They found out the hard way. The Rangers falling 3-0 at home in game one. The Florida Panthers up 1-0 in the best of 7 Eastern Conference final. The Western Conference final goes tonight between Edmonton and Dallas, and that should be a really entertaining game as well. I'm excited for both of these series, realistically. But outside of those 4 teams, that means that there are 28 other teams who have been eliminated and 20 other teams that are looking forward to next season, which means the rumor mill is starting to really, run rampant here around the NHL. And there's a few that the Maple Leafs have been linked to. So on today's show, we're going to kind of address and attack each one individually and kind of work through them and see, are they possible? Do we think it'll happen? What will need to happen for this to come to fruition? So that's kind of what we're going to do here on today's show. And the first one I think we should start with is one that, I mean, a lot of people have been speculating about and speculation, rumors, same thing. And it's Marc Savard potentially joining Craig Berube's staff. And this one really is going to take up a life of its own over the next 24 hours after the Flames and Marc Savard officially parted ways on Wednesday, making him free to sign elsewhere if he should decide to. And we do know that Marc Savard was a part of Craig Berube's staff once upon a time, back when he was in St. Louis. Potentially a reunion afoot here in Toronto, Dave.
Yeah, it was kind of reported just before Berube was even officially hired. Like, it was like we knew that was coming eventually, and then we're like, okay, this kind of makes sense because of the ties with Berube. And I was trying to remember how exactly the coaching tree kind of landed, right? So I know he was an assistant in St. Louis. Then he went to be a head coach in the OHL with the Spitfires. And then he went to the Flames. I thought maybe truly he had a connection with Brad Treliving, but appears that happened after Brad was gone. But yeah, it's kind of weird how the pieces of the puzzle seem to be formulating right now. And it wouldn't be surprising to hear a agreement with the Leafs is coming soon.
I think that we'll probably hear that at some point. It would make no sense for Savard to leave his post in Calgary if he didn't have something already lined up. And usually when there's smoke, there's fire. So that's rumor number one, that Marc Savard is set to join Craig Berube's staff after leaving the Calgary Flames staff. And it's interesting because online you look and there's, you got your supporters, you got your doubters. But why don't we take a look into what Marc Savard has done over the last few years? So we know that he was on Craig Berube's staff in 2019-2020, the pandemic shortened season. And that season he was there, ran the power play, which has been reported to be a pretty successful one. It was ranked 3rd in the NHL that season. But that was the only year that he was with St. Louis, the only year that he was with Craig Berube as an NHL assistant. Outside of that, he then went on to be a head coach for the Windsor Spitfires for 2 seasons, as you mentioned. While he was there, he went 88, 35, and 13. taken the Spits to an OHL final in his first season as their head coach. Both years was the number one offense in the OHL and had the number 3 and number 2 power play in the OHL that year. And this kid named Wyatt Johnston was one of the players that he was able to cultivate in Windsor and has turned into a superstar. So a lot of success as a head coach in the OHL, and he was able to parlay that back into another NHL assistant role this past year in Calgary. Didn't go as well, obviously. I think if it went extremely well, then they probably just would have stuck it out, right? Like Savard would have stuck
Mhm.
on the staff if it went swimmingly, and they would have just gone on about their day. But obviously, it doesn't sound like it went well. Their power play wasn't great, 17.9% this year, which that's not what you wanted. He was brought in to help spark this team's offense, and it's not quite what happened. However, Dave, I did look into it a little bit because one thing that I've learned about coaching and just from, observing the NHL, the NFL, and it doesn't matter what sport it is, sometimes it takes a little bit for the systems to really get going. So I thought, I wonder what the power play numbers looked like a little later in the season once, the team kind of got the hang of what Marc Savard was trying to do. They were ranked the 5th best power play from March 1st onward at 27.1%. So it took some time, but eventually the Flames figured out how to operate Savard's power play, and they got it going in the final 23 games. So I actually look at that as a positive. We try and be as positive as we can here on Locked On Leafs. Sure, 17.9 throughout the whole season, not great. But from March 1st onward, the 5th best power play in the NHL, that's what he's bringing to Toronto. And that is sorely needed for this group to kind of bolster that power play.
I also wonder if that correlates to the Flames going with younger players, right? Putting younger players in more favorable positions after they made a bunch of trades, right? They a lot of the roster got kind of gutted, right? Of like key veterans, and that remember, like the Flames went on a roll and thought maybe potentially could have. They were, I wouldn't say in the playoff conversation because then they eventually dropped off.
Yeah,
But they were
deadline.
getting
Around the deadline, it was like, what do we do here? Like, I don't know about that, but they ultimately did, kind of fall
yeah.
off.
So like I do remember watching and I edited a lot of columns on the Flames, and it was talked about a lot how the younger players were kind of picking up some of the veterans, right? Especially Nazem Kadri playing with Zari. Pospisil was doing quite well for them. Like when you get these younger guys into the fold, they just bring a different element. I feel like that's on the Flames. That's why the Flames are going in that younger direction. They want to inject some youth into that roster there. So I think that probably plays a little bit of the factor in how that all played out in Calgary. And I know, I saw the tweets. It's funny how many people try to throw cold water, and it happened in the Discord too. And it's like, let's look at the situations and the circumstances before we completely try to kibosh what could be a potentially good thing for the Leafs here.
Oh, 100%. I mean, just because, something didn't work out very well in one situation doesn't mean that it won't work out in another. So I think Marc Savard would be a good addition to Craig Berube's staff. They're I think it's pretty obvious that a lot of people are expecting the Leafs to move on from at least Guy Boucher, and that opens up a spot for Marc Savard to run the power play, run the forward bench, and just kind of seamlessly go in and work under Berube, and possibly if they keep Mike Van Ryn, like that's the exact staff that worked together once before. So there is some cohesion there, and we'll see what happens with Dean Chinouth as well. Should note that it sounds like Sheldon Keefe is getting set to take the head coaching position in New Jersey. So with that expected to be made official later today, does he want to take any of the Leafs coaches with him? Like, is that maybe Dean Chinouth just joins Sheldon Keefe in New Jersey instead of sticking it around with a Craig Berube? So that's something to also kind of keep in mind as the Maple Leafs round out their staff. Does Keefe want to take any of his guys with him? And then Berube is going to have to fill in after that. I do want to pull up that excerpt that I sent you. Can we pull that up quickly? It's about Marc Savard and his philosophy. I found an Athletic article that was written last year, just ahead of the season when Savard signed. It was written by Julian McKenzie, friend of the show, and this is what he was. This was a little excerpt from it. Savard's philosophy is to trust his higher skilled, offensive minded players to be creative and free while in attack. He wants players consistently moving in order to find open spaces and constantly anticipating where their teammates will be on breakouts. Speed is the name of the game, whether that's in transition as they rush the blue line or race to the corners off quick, short dump-ins. Is that not what we want to see? Like that's exactly what we were preaching the whole time, especially on the power play. Like you talk about, he wants players consistently moving in order to find open spaces. On the power play, how often were we sitting there yelling at the TV, move, like skate, move the puck,
Yeah.
play faster? It was way too stagnant. And, Marc Savard, who's known for being like a very creative, offensively driven guy. There's another part of the story where I guess he had like this 200-page playbook, essentially almost like a football playbook, but like a bunch of hockey plays with like 200 of them. And I guess it got damaged or lost or something like that in some sort of catastrophe that happened in Windsor. So he lost it, and now he has to try and come up with all these plays again. But yeah, he should bring some creativity, and with the offensive weapons that the Maple Leafs have, it should be a good match. So again, the news not made official as of now; it's still just a rumor. But with him officially parting ways with the Flames, seems likely to happen at this point.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising within the next couple of days we hear something of where he goes next.
Yep. On the other side, we hit up rumor number 2, and this one has really run wild over the last couple of days. Has to do with Mitch Marner and a certain landing spot out west. We'll get to that and more on the other side. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NHL and makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to puck drop. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipt, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets. They've got flash deals. They've got zone deals, all in pricing. You can see your seat views right when you get your tickets. You get that panoramic view from your seat from the app before you even buy, and the lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use a code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you. We are a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast. You can find us whichever platform you use to download your podcast audio-wise. And you can also find us up on YouTube. Hit subscribe. Get that daily dose of Maple Leafs content directly to you Monday through Friday. We're going through the rumor mill and what the Maple Leafs have been linked to over the last couple of days here, where he talked about how the coaching staff could get an addition in Marc Savard over the next little bit. And the other rumor that's really making waves right now is Mitch Marner, and possibly the Leafs could the Preds be making space to acquire Mitch Marner? Could this be a match made in heaven for these two squads? Obviously, this really came based off of Nashville moving out Ryan McDonough's $6.75 million, only took back draft picks. So, they're opening up cap space. We know that they're looking to get better and add a lot more offensive talent. Perhaps Mitch Marner is the guy that they could be targeting. What do you think about this rumor, Dave? Does this one make sense to you?
It makes sense to me because when I was looking at destinations for Mitch Marner, Nashville's a team that needs scoring, right? And they always have a tough time getting players that can generate offense, and there's no one that's going to do that better than Marner for what they have, right? They have Forsberg on the team, but they really don't have like an elite scorer outside of him. They don't have a playmaker too. Like it's not really how like in their DNA in terms of how they play, and because they just don't have guys like that. Roman Josi is like probably the guy that helps do a lot of that. And I know everyone, and I think the thing people need to realize here is everyone's talking about Juuse Saros as like the guy in the trade.
Mm-hmm.
To me, you have to be very weary of that because of, yes, he fills an immediate need for the team at goaltending. But if you're going to hitch your ride on Juuse Saros being the main part coming back, I think that could be problematic for the Leafs.
Why is that problematic?
Because I think the Leafs should be aiming a little bit higher in terms of their return, right? You're looking at a 30-year-old goaltender who's, he's been really good, but he's also had his ups and downs. He's not coming off a very good playoff right now, right? I think if you're going to be trading Marner, go and get some of these younger players that the Predators have started to build up a little bit here, right? And they have, I'm not saying go for draft picks,
yeah,
but I just get when you got a guy like Saros on the last year of his deal, you're going to open up the same can of worms as what's his next contract look like.
Well, I mean, that's obviously the roll of the dice there, and I would think both parties are like, can we talk to the other guys, see if there's interest in extending? Like, I think yes, if a trade like that were to be done, where both players need extensions, I think that they would both come with sign-in trades would be my assumption, or else, yeah, that would not be good. To trade Mitch Marner for a 1-year rental of Juuse Saros would not be wise. That would be terrible asset management. Completely agree. But I actually don't like, I disagree. I think if you can really solidify yourself in net with a guy like Juuse Saros, like this guy's been a top 5 goalie in the league for what, 5-6 years now? Like, and goaltenders can last deep into their 30s. Like, look at what we're seeing out of Jacob Markstrom, deep. He's what, like mid 30s at this point. Sergei Bobrovsky's 35. Look what he did. He just pitched a shutout in a conference final last night. And last year, he took, the team all the way to a Stanley Cup final. But we're talking about a guy who's a career .917 save percentage, even in this past playoffs, so 202 goals against. He just couldn't get any offense, couldn't get any support, unfortunately. But I don't know. I think I would be okay with, like, even if it were just a 1-for-1 swap, assuming that it comes with a sign and trade, or maybe not 1-for-1, but like where the main piece coming back is Juuse Saros. I think I'd be okay with it, honestly. Shore up that goaltending, because there's one thing that I think we could take from this year's playoffs. Dude, you can win if you got good goaltending. They could steal you a game or two, and you could go far. Look at the goalies that are left in the playoffs. Ottinger, Shesterkin, Bobrovsky. Obviously, the situation in Edmonton's a little bit different than the rest, but 3 of the 4 goaltenders are like bona fide stud goalies. And Juuse Saros is that. To me, I believe he is that. So if you can turn, obviously Marner is a superstar player in himself, but if you can turn that into a top-tier goaltender, have that completely shored up, you go forward with Saros and Woll, I think you're set. And then from there, you can, Woll, I don't think Saros is even going to cost that much. Like goalies, they only play 60 games a year. So it's not like they go out there and garner the $10-11 million. I mean, what Hellbuck signed for? 8 something, I think. Like Vasilevsky's in the 8s. Like, so you would think Saros probably going to be in the 7 to 8 range. So that would leave a few extra $1 million, to go out and upgrade from, a number 4 to like a number 2 defenseman, right? So I think I would be even like the cap space, I suppose, that you're getting back by not having to re-sign Marner, by getting a guy like Saros might even be worth the extra little bit of value in that deal. I would be okay with that being kind of the main pieces, at least the main targets in a trade like that.
Like, I understand why Saros would be the most attractive part of it. Again, I also just think I'm always very weary of investing a lot in goaltenders, especially when they get in the later ends of their career, right?
Well, but like 30 is not that old for a goalie, though.
No, but how long would you give him a contract for? Right?
5, 6 years. I think he'd be perfectly good to perform throughout the duration of that contract.
Okay, like because Hellebuck had to got an 8-year deal, right? The market gets set by someone like that, right? And if we're touting Saros like a Hellebuck, why wouldn't he just say, okay, I'll go to the market, get an 8-year deal from a there are gonna be a lot of teams that are desperate for goaltenders that are
Well,
gonna
you can't
probably
get an 8-year deal. You can only get a 7-year
all right,
deal if you're a
7
market.
well, unless he does again, unless he tells the Predators, well, I'm not gonna sign unless Leafs are gonna give me 8 years. Then that could
Right.
complicate things as well. We're playing a lot of hypotheticals here, so
Yeah.
I get that. I just get very weary about goaltenders when you pay them a lot because that can get you in trouble.
Fair, fair. I mean, you look at obviously what we saw happen in Edmonton a couple of years ago with Jack Campbell, but I think the track record of a guy like Juuse Saros
I
is
agree.
far more superior than what it is for Jack Campbell. And I mean, at one point, I guess Sergei Bobrovsky, that looked like an albatross of a contract. But the last 2 years, Dave, that dude has made his money. He has made his money and he is fully worth the 10 sheets that he's getting paid on a yearly basis. So, if you can get good goaltending, I think it's worth paying up for, but we'll see. But that is another kind of interesting little rumor that's circulating, and that's kind of stemmed from the Ryan McDonagh deal that was made a couple of days ago between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Nashville Predators. There's also one other little tentacle that is linked to the Maple Leafs via this trade that did occur between the Preds and the Bolts. That's rumor number 3, and we'll get to that next.
Today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed has a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. And it is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. They streamline the hiring process with powerful tools that help you find candidates fast. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to U.S. Indeed data. Even better, Indeed is the only job site where you pay for applications that meet your must-have requirements. Indeed is an unbelievably powerful hiring platform, delivering 4 times more hires than any other job site combined, according to Talent Nest back in 2019. So join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked on. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 job credit now at Indeed.com/locked on. That's Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
The Locked On Leafs podcast continues with Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. So we've gone through a couple of the rumor mill talking points that have linked the Toronto Maple Leafs to this point. Sounds like Marc Savard. This one seems a lot closer to actually happening, him potentially joining Craig Berube's coaching staff here in Toronto. And then a lot of buzz about the Predators possibly making space for Mitch Marner when they made that trade to send out Ryan McDonagh's money. Should note this actually. Barry Trotz did say that he has not talked to Toronto about Mitch Marner, and reports and many insiders have also acknowledged that no team has, or the Leafs haven't engaged with any team about Mitch Marner yet. And I think the word yet is what's operative there, because I think we all knew that the coach was going to be the first order of business for Brad Treliving this offseason. Now that they've got the coach in place, looks like he's getting close to filling out his staff. We already heard that they're going through all of their meetings with the pro scouts this week. I'd imagine those discussions will be held shortly as to, what to do with this core, who fits, who doesn't, what can they do, what avenues can they explore, one of which I would imagine Mitch Marner at some point would come up, which again, we talked about another tentacle kind of coming, rippling through after the McDonagh deal. You look at what happens in Tampa Bay, they give up just draft picks and bring in the full $6.75 million cap hit of Ryan McDonagh, that leaves the Tampa Bay Lightning with just a little bit over $5 million in cap space, and they still have a couple of guys they need to sign. One of which being their captain, Steven Stamkos. Unless he's preparing to take a big discount to stay with Tampa Bay, people are saying that the McDonagh deal almost means that they probably made a decision that they're not willing to re-up Stammer unless he takes a big-time discount, in which case, could Stamkos be coming home, Dave? Possibly. They open up some cap space. They move Mitch Marner out. They shore up the goaltending. Does that leave enough money to go and bring Stamkos home finally?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the Lightning's cap friendly page, and unless they got a lot of guys they want to ship out here, like I'm looking at the players making big money on this team. They're all core important players. I can't see a scenario where they would move any of those guys, like talking Kucherov, Point, Hagel, Sorelli, Nick Paul, Sergachev starting his new deal, Chernak starting his new deal. Like these guys, most of those guys have no trade clauses and they're making big money. So this is what happens when everyone's like, "Oh, look at they got this guy to a good deal." Those deals add up, and this is where Stamkos is just like, "How about me?"
Yeah, where's my money? I mean, they've paid him a lot of money, but at this point, yeah, he's sitting there looking like John Travolta walking into the room. Where's my new contract? Everyone else is getting a new contract. What about me?
And the wrinkle too is next year they want to go and pay another guy in Victor Hedman, who is also in the last year of his deal. And he doesn't want to have the same thing happen that Stamkos did, where he went into his final year without any sort of deal. So yeah, I'm struggling right now to see a scenario where he returns to the Lightning, and then okay, so now it becomes where does he go next? He could potentially be. I did a story for Sportsnet on places he could go to. Toronto was like a dark horse place because the power play and playoff scoring has been such an issue. He's a guy that fixes it.
And he's a proven winner. A proven winner, good leader, captain, champion, power play specialist, goal scorer in the playoffs. He fits the bill for a lot of what Toronto needs and wants. And when we also talk about guys who knows what it takes, guys who do put their bodies on the line come playoff time, Stammer's been willing to do that. Stammer's been willing to block a shot in the playoffs when they're killing off, a 2-1 lead late in the game or a 3-2 lead late in the game to hold the lead. Like Stammer's been willing to do that. So he's a gamer. So I think the Maple Leafs, if he does get to free agency, I would think that a phone call is made to him and his agent to see what it would take to bring him home. Now, I am curious what you would like if you were Brad Treliving, like what's a comfortable contract for you to sign him and bring him to Toronto and pull the trigger on that? Because it's not like last time where it was like blank check. You're bringing him down to the boardroom. You've got all these plans, and basically you were going to give him the Tavares treatment. Is not going to be the same this time around. So, like, what do you think that number would have to be for Treliving to say, "All right, this makes sense for us," and pull the trigger and actually bring him to Toronto?
That's tough because a guy just put up 90 points, 40 goals.
Yeah,
like, you can't walk into that room and say, "All right, like, can we get you in the 5 to 6?" Because that's not going to happen. It's going to start north. I think it's going to be in the 7 to 8 range minimum if he's willing to take a haircut to come to Toronto. And even then, other teams will be like, "Well, we'll pay you more." I look at Detroit. That looks like another destination to me. Like Steve Yzerman, good relationship there. They need some leadership. They need some goal scoring. He'd be perfect there. Nashville could just be like, "Why would we give up assets for Marner when we can get Stamkos?"
Totally.
So the Leafs have competition here, and the only pull they're going to have is you want to come in and join the band and trying to end this curse that you kind of played a part in for a couple of years.
Little bit, but I still think that the Leafs at least can play the hometown card.
Yes.
Like you've never done it. You came close. You considered it before. Now that Tampa doesn't want you, do you want to come where you're wanted? Do you want to come home to Toronto and take a bit of a discount? I think term would have to play probably a factor in it. Like you could probably buy down the AAV if you give him term. Are you willing to do that if you're Toronto? I don't know. Like, are you willing to go, to 4 years if that buys you down to like 6 million a year? Potentially. Like now you're kind of getting into Patrick Marleau territory at that point. So you will have to weigh the pros and cons. Luckily, the cap is going up and up and up over the next 4 years projected, whereas the cap was flat due to the pandemic when Marlowe's contract hit, his final year. And it was like, we need more money because the cap stayed flat. And we all know what ended up happening for them to get out of that deal. So yeah, it's definitely something that is intriguing and something that we could probably explore a little bit more throughout the offseason as we get closer to free agency and we start to target guys who we believe could be some possible free agents to look at for Brad Treliving, Craig Berube and company as we get closer to July 1st. Who knows? Maybe Stammer will end up signing a deal 2 days before free agency, just like he did a couple of years ago and spurned Toronto for the second time. Who knows? We'll see what happens. All right, buddy. I think that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at _Morassutti and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.